This is by far the biggest FPL video I've ever made. We go through all the promoted teams and pick out some of their players to see if they're worth going for in FPL next season. Okay, before we get into the players themselves, I think it's worth just analysing how big of a step up it is from the Championship to the Premier League. And what I've done, the last 5 Championship Golden Boot winners, they went on to play in the Premier League the season after, whether that's they went up with their club because they got promoted or they got signed by a Premier League team the season after. And on average, in the Premier League the season after, they scored 24% of the goals that they did in the Championship the season before. Now, that's obviously down to a number of factors. One, of course, the level in the Premier League is obviously higher. And 2, there are less games in the Premier League. So naturally, there are going to be less goals. But for me, you know, when applying that sort of figure to Championship stats, that works across the board because, you know, everyone that joins the Premier League is going to play less games. So I think it's a good measure to look at players that you might consider picking. Also, just looking at those stats, 19-20 Mitrovic and 17-18 Vidra, their goals were a heck of a lot lower than the rest of them. So I'm excluding them from the analysis that I've done, where you come to a figure of 35%. So I'd say on average, a player moving from the Championship to the Premier League is going to score 35% of the goals they did the season before. And hopefully that bit of goal-to-goal maths helped you out. Looking at Burnley first, their top scorer in the Championship with Nathan Tella. He got 17 goals from only 10.3 expected goals. And that translates, if you apply that 35% rule, translates across to 6 goals that he's expected to get next season. Obviously with Nathan Tella, he was on loan from Southampton at Burnley. So who knows whether he's going to be playing for Burnley in the Prem next season? I don't think so. I think Southampton are going to do all they can to try and keep hold of him and play him in the Championship because he was one of the best players in the league last season, so it totally makes sense for them to keep him. The star player for Burnley, in my opinion, is Manuel Benson. 33 games and 11 goals. Doesn't look like he lit the world up, but having seen him play a couple of times, I'm a season ticket holder at Bristol City myself, he was by far Burnley's best player. He had a vibe of Arjen Robben about him. He plays on the right-hand side, cuts in and shoots on his left, and no one seems to be able to stop him. I think there were 4 or 5 games in a row where he did the classic cut back on the left foot and then curl it into the far corner. I think he did that 4 or 5 games in a row, and I really think of all those Burnley players listed there, Josh Brownhill as well, I think is fantastic, but Benson in particular for the attacking returns, I think he's the one that's going to make the step up. Again though, like translating goals to the 35% rule, he's only expected to get 4, so we'll wait and see on him. Josh Brownhill I think is a good option. He takes the set pieces for Burnley and he had a decent level of returns in the Championship. I'd definitely say he's worth picking should he come in at 4.5 million. I'm pretty sure his first season in the Premier League when he was starting for Burnley he was 4.5 million, and he was a great option at that price. So I think that's where I'd be picking Burnley players at this stage. Okay, next up we've got Luton. Their top scorer was Carlton Morris. Played 44 games, scored 20 goals from 15 expected goals. Bit of a trend with these Championship players outperforming their underlying numbers. That 20 goals, 35% rule apply. You get about 7 goals in a season, really. And I think that's a rough total for what he's going to get. Unless Luton signs someone else, I don't think they're going to have a striker score more than 10 goals. That's just the kind of vibe I get from them personally. I'd say Adebayo, again, similar to my story with Burnley. Having watched Luton Town on a couple of occasions this season when they played Bristol City, Adebayo is by far their best player. He underperformed his numbers by quite a lot. Basically 13 expected goals and he only scored 7. I think his numbers are gonna prop up a little bit in the Premier League and maybe exceed that 35% rule because I think he's good enough to do so. Looking at the rest of the players, again, maybe Lockyer and Panzu and Campbell, they're worth picking if they're 4.5 million, but realistically beyond that, I don't really think you're going to be picking any Luton attackers. And finally, last but not least, we've got Sheffield United. Their star player was Ndiaye. He played featured at least in all 46 games of the Championship season. Scored 14 goals and got 11 assists. Again, I don't think he lit the world up, certainly in terms of assists, but in terms of goals, 14, you know, it's up there, but it's not groundbreaking. And that again translates across to around 5 goals expected in the Premier League. I think similar to the likes of Brownhill, etc. If he comes in super cheap, I think he's a good option, but I don't really think you're going to be starting with him. Ollie McBurney, he's had a mixed time of it when he has played in the Premier League, scored 13 goals from 38 games. Again, I'm not really sure you're going to be picking the Sheffield United midfielders or forwards based on these stats. The one I would look out for, though, is Amadozic. You can see him at the bottom there. Played 34. He's a defender. Scored 6 goals in the Championship last season. Remains to be seen, obviously, what he can do in the Premier League. But if he can return any kind of numbers like that in the Premier League, he'll be a very good pick. And I think for me, we'll see what he comes in at in terms of price, and I might consider picking him. So that's the attacking stats out of the way. So just analysing teams defensively and teams as a whole, we've got Burnley, Sheffield United and Luton. Obviously, they all are the promoted teams. Burnley conceded the fewest goals. Across the 46-game season, they conceded 35. Sheffield United 39 and Luton Town also conceded 39. You can also see on the expected goals against, Burnley win that as well, 38.2 compared to around 44 for the other teams. In total clean sheets, it was neck and neck between Burnley and Luton, with Sheffield United keeping 19. Just going into a bit of detail about each team's goalkeepers, both Burnley and Sheffield United used a couple throughout the season. So Peacock Farrell played a few games, but Muric was the star goalkeeper for Burnley, played 41 games, conceded 31 and made 2 saves per 90. Whereas Peacock Farrell, I think he appeared in what must be more dominant games for Burnley, where he had less to do. You know, he conceded in half the goals that he played games, and he barely made a save per 90. Fotheringham was the mainly starting keeper for Sheffield United, played 40 games, conceded 32, 1.9 saves per 90. Very similar stats really to Muric. And then Davies, he played, conceded pretty much every game that he played. 7 games, 7 goals against, but he did nearly make 3 saves per game. And then Hovarth, I think I've pronounced that correctly, for Luton, conceded 37 goals and made 2 saves per 90. All these goalkeepers are really quite similar, 40-ish games played, 30-ish goals conceded and 2-ish saves per 90. You're sort of getting a similar level goalkeeper, I think, with each of them. And depending on their price, Muric, Fotheringham or Hovarth, if they're 4 million, they could be worth picking. But I think it remains to be seen what they get priced at. I think it'd be nice to have one of these guys as your bench goalkeeper at a minimum. And finally, just a look at the defenders. I think there are 3 standout ones for me. I've just included the 2 Luton guys just so Luton have a bit of coverage in Baldock as well. I remember when Baldock had his first season in the Premier League, he was one of the best defenders in FPL. I'm not quite sure he's playing at that level anymore. Roberts and Martin for Burnley, they had really good seasons. Both got 4 goals and 6 assists. I think they're 2 decent options. And again, we'll wait to see how these defenders are priced. If they come in at 4 million, I think they could be reasonably decent options. Having a defender with that track record in the Championship, just sitting on your bench at 4 million, I think is perfectly decent. And similar to Amadozic as well, I'm really interested to see what FPL price him at. 6 goals, nothing to be sniffed at in the Championship. So we'll see what he's priced at. I think of all the defenders, he's the one I'm most interested in seeing how he's priced up. And that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that little trawl through all the Championship teams. I put quite a bit of effort into this video, as you can probably appreciate, just to understand who are the players that might be worth picking in FPL next season. Let me know what you think in the comments. If I missed anyone, I'd be interested to know. And if you disagree with anything I've said, let me know in the comments. Please like the video if you enjoyed and subscribe to the Golden Goal channel if you want to see more content in the future. I'll see you in the next video.